This morning started differently because my car had been making strange noises since last night, and I knew I needed to take it to a mechanic, but there was something nagging at the back of my mind about whether mechanics could really be trusted or not, because I had been scammed before at least 2 or 3 times when mechanics had fooled me and charged me extra money for unnecessary work. And this time, I was determined that if anyone tried to cheat me, I would catch them no matter what it took. So I thought I needed to come up with a plan to find out the truth about whether the mechanic was actually doing honest work or just trying to rob me blind, because I had this gut feeling, this deep suspicion that wasn't without reason given my past experiences with different mechanics. So I got ready early in the morning and took my car to this mechanic shop that was pretty close to my house and had a good reputation in the area where everyone praised him, saying he was honest and did good work. But I knew that appearances could be deceiving, and you couldn't just blindly trust everyone. So when I arrived there, the mechanic was standing outside, and when he saw me, he smiled and asked what the problem was, sir. So I told him that my car engine was making noises and maybe some part had gone bad. So he opened the hood and started inspecting it. And within just a few minutes, he told me that, yes, sir, this part needs to be changed, and once we install a new part, it will be fixed. And I was thinking, let me see what happens, because I already had a plan that I was going to execute. But first I needed to see what he would say and how much money he would ask for. So he told me that the part would cost separately, and labor charges would be separate, and altogether it would come to around 5,000 rupees. And hearing this, I was a bit shocked, because that was way too much money for just one small part. So I asked him how much time it would take, and he said, sir, you can come back after 2 hours. The work will be done. And hearing this, I thought, perfect. This was exactly what I wanted, because now I could execute my plan that I had already thought through, that if something felt off, I would know what to do. And so I agreed and told him, okay, I will come back in 2 hours, and please do a good job, because this car is very important to me, and I need it to be working properly. And he assured me that, don't worry, sir, we will take good care of it, and your car will be as good as new. And I nodded and started walking towards my car. But before I left, I had already prepared something special that he had no idea about, because I had brought with me a tiny hidden camera that I had ordered online, specifically for situations like this, where I suspected someone might try to cheat me, and this camera was so small that it could easily be hidden, and it had the capability to record for hours and send the footage directly to my phone through a mobile app. So before I handed over my car keys to the mechanic, I had secretly placed this camera inside my car, in a position where it could capture everything that happened near the engine and around the car, and the mechanic had absolutely no clue that he was being watched and recorded, and this gave me a sense of satisfaction, because I knew that if he tried anything suspicious, I would have solid proof and evidence that could be used against him, and so I left the shop and pretended to drive away. But actually I parked my car just around the corner where I could still keep an eye on the shop from a distance. And I sat there checking my phone every few minutes, because the camera was already streaming live footage to my phone, and I could see exactly what was happening inside the shop, and for the first 10 minutes, everything seemed normal. The mechanic was working on my car, inspecting the engine and looking at different parts, and I thought, maybe I was wrong, maybe this guy is actually honest, and I am just being paranoid because of my past experiences. But then something strange started happening. After about 15 minutes, I saw him looking around as if checking whether anyone was watching him, and then he did something that made my blood boil. He opened the hood fully and started removing a part from my car, but it wasn't the old damaged part that he had shown me earlier. Instead, he was removing a brand new part that I had just installed last month, and this part was expensive and worked perfectly fine, and there was absolutely no reason to remove it. And I watched in disbelief as he carefully took out this new part and placed it aside, and then I saw him pick up an old used part that looked worn out and damaged, and he started installing that old part into my car instead of the new one, and my suspicions were confirmed right there, that this mechanic was indeed a scammer, and he was planning to steal my new part and probably sell it or use it in someone else's car and charge me full price for a new part, while actually giving me a used, damaged one. And I felt this surge of anger rising inside me, but I controlled myself because I knew I had to catch him red-handed with solid proof, and just watching this on my phone wasn't enough. I needed to confront him in person and expose his scam in front of everyone, and teach him a lesson that he would never forget for the rest of his life. So I continued watching the live feed from my hidden camera, and what I saw next made me even more convinced that I had made the right decision by setting up this surveillance, because after the mechanic finished removing my new part and installing the old damaged one in its place, he walked over to another car that was parked in the corner of his shop, and this car belonged to someone else, obviously another customer who had probably brought their vehicle for repairs, and I watched as the mechanic opened the hood of that other car. And guess what he did next? He took my brand new, expensive part that he had just stolen from my car and started installing it into this other customer's vehicle. And at that moment, everything became crystal clear to me. This wasn't just a one-time scam, this was his regular business model. His entire operation was based on stealing good parts from unsuspecting customers like me and then using those parts in other customers' cars while charging everyone full price for new parts and keeping all the profit for himself and probably selling the extra parts on the side for additional income. And I realized that he had probably done this to hundreds of customers over the years and gotten away with it because most people don't have the knowledge or the suspicion to catch such scams, and they simply trust the mechanic when he tells them that certain parts need to be replaced, and they pay the money without questioning anything. And this realization made me furious because it wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle of trust and honesty, and how this man was betraying the trust of every single customer who walked into his shop. And I knew I had to do something about it, not just for myself, but for all the other innocent people who might fall victim to his scam in the future. And so I decided that I wasn't going to wait for the full 2 hours, like he had told me. Instead, I was going to go back to the shop right now after just 20 minutes and catch him in the act while he was still working on that other car with my stolen part, and the thought of seeing his face when I confronted him gave me a strange sense of satisfaction and anticipation, because I knew this was going to be epic and he had no idea what was coming for him. And so I started my car and drove back towards the shop, and as I got closer, my heart was beating faster with a mix of anger and excitement. And I parked right in front of the shop and got out of my car, and I could see through the window that the mechanic was still busy working on that other vehicle, and he hadn't noticed me yet because he was so focused on installing my part into that car. And I took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance of the shop, trying to stay calm and composed, even though inside I was burning with rage. And I pushed open the door, and the bell above the door made a ringing sound, and the mechanic immediately looked up, and when he saw me, his face went pale and his eyes widened in shock and surprise, because he clearly wasn't expecting me to come back so soon. And for a brief moment, he just stood there, frozen like a deer caught in headlights, not knowing what to say or do. And I could see the panic in his eyes as he quickly glanced at the other car, where my part was halfway installed, and then back at me. And he tried to compose himself and put on a fake smile and said, "Oh, sir, you came back so early, I told you it would take 2 hours, the work isn't finished yet." And I looked him straight in the eyes and said in a calm but firm voice, "I know exactly what you are doing, and I saw everything." And his smile immediately disappeared and was replaced by a confused and nervous expression. And he stammered, "What do you mean, sir? I am just doing the repair work like I told you." And I took a step closer to him and said, "Really then? Why did I see you remove a perfectly good new part from my car and install an old damaged part instead? And why did I see you take that new part and install it in that car over there," pointing to the other vehicle? And his face turned red and he started sweating, and he tried to act angry and defensive to cover up his guilt, and he raised his voice and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? How dare you accuse me of such things? I am an honest mechanic and I have been running this shop for 10 years, and nobody has ever complained about me. And who do you think you are coming here and making such serious allegations without any proof?" And I could see that he was trying to intimidate me and make me back down. But I wasn't going to let that happen because I had all the proof I needed, and I remained calm and pulled out my phone from my pocket and held it up so he could see the screen. And I said, "Proof, you want proof? Well, I have it all right here on video," and I turned the phone screen towards him and showed him the live feed from the hidden camera that was still recording inside my car, and his eyes went wide as he saw himself on the screen, clear as day, removing my new part and installing the old one, and then taking my part to the other car, and his mouth opened, but no words came out because he knew he was caught red-handed, and there was no way he could talk his way out of this situation, and the color drained from his face, and he looked like he might collapse right there on the spot. The silence in that garage was deafening for those few seconds as the mechanic stood there staring at my phone screen, watching himself commit the crime that he thought nobody would ever discover. And I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out what to say or how to get out of this mess. But there was no escape, because the evidence was right there, undeniable and crystal clear, and after what felt like an eternity, he finally opened his mouth and tried to speak, but his voice came out shaky and uncertain, and he said, "This is not what it looks like, sir. Please let me explain." And I cut him off and said, "Explain what exactly? Explain how you systematically steal parts from your customers. Explain how you charge people for new parts while giving them old damaged ones. Explain how you have been running this scam operation for who knows how long." And he tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand and continued talking, because I wasn't done yet, and I said, "Do you have any idea how many people you have cheated? How many families you have stolen from people who work hard for their money and trust you to do an honest job, and you betray that trust every single day?" And he started to realize that his usual tactics of intimidation and denial weren't going to work this time, so he changed his strategy, and his tone became softer, almost pleading, and he said, "Sir, please, I made a mistake, I admit it, but please don't ruin my life. I have a family to feed, I have children who depend on me, and this shop is my only source of income. And if you report me to the police or make this public, my reputation will be destroyed, and I will lose everything." And I looked at him with disgust and said, "You should have thought about your family before you started stealing from innocent people. You should have thought about the consequences before you decided to build your business on lies and fraud." And he fell to his knees right there in front of me with tears in his eyes and said, "Please, sir, I am begging you have mercy on me. I will give you back your part. I will fix your car for free. I will do anything you want. Just please don't call the police and don't post this video online." And I stood there looking down at him, feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt satisfied seeing him finally face the consequences of his actions, but on the other hand, I also felt a strange sense of pity, because here was a man who had destroyed his own life through his own greed and dishonesty, and now he was paying the price. And I thought about what I should do next. Should I call the police and have him arrested? Should I post the video online and expose him to the whole world? Or should I give him a chance to redeem himself and learn from his mistakes? And as I was contemplating these options, the mechanic continued pleading and crying and saying, "Sir, I swear on my children, I will never do this again. Please give me one chance. I will change, I promise." And then something unexpected happened. The door of the shop opened and another customer walked in, a middle-aged man who was probably there to pick up his car. And when he saw the mechanic on his knees crying and me standing there with my phone, he looked confused and asked, "What is going on here? Is everything all right?" And I turned to look at this new customer, and I wondered how many times this mechanic had scammed him as well. And I made a decision right there and then, and I said to the new customer, "Sir, do you know what kind of person you have been trusting with your vehicle?" And before the mechanic could say anything, I showed the new customer the video on my phone and explained everything that had happened, and the customer's face went from confusion to shock to anger as he watched the footage, and he said, "No, sir, please, it is all a misunderstanding." But the new customer cut him off and said, "Did you do this to my car too? How many times have you stolen from me and charged me for parts I never received?" And the mechanic didn't know what to say, because now he was facing two angry customers instead of one, and the situation was spiraling out of his control. And I said to the mechanic, "You see, this is what happens when you lie and cheat. Eventually the truth comes out and you have to face everyone you have wronged." And the new customer pulled out his phone and said, "I am calling the police right now. This man needs to be arrested." And the mechanic panicked even more and grabbed my leg and said, "Please, sir, stop him. Don't let him call the police. I will do anything. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And I looked down at him and said, "You know what? I think the whole community deserves to know what kind of business you are running here. People have the right to know that they are being scammed." And with that, I started recording a new video on my phone, pointing the camera at the mechanic who was still on his knees. And I said, "For anyone watching this video, this is what happens when you trust the wrong people. This mechanic right here has been stealing parts from customers and replacing them with damaged ones, and I have proof of everything." And the mechanic realized that I was serious about exposing him, and he completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably and saying, "Please no, sir, my life will be over. Nobody will ever come to my shop again. I will be ruined. And I stopped recording and said, that is exactly what should happen. You deserve to lose everything you have built on lies and fraud. The mechanic was now completely devastated, his entire body shaking with sobs and his face buried in his hands, and I could see that he had finally realized the gravity of what he had done and the consequences that were about to follow, and the other customer was still on his phone talking to someone, probably the police, and explaining the situation. And I stood there watching this whole scene unfold and thinking about how one person's greed and dishonesty could destroy not just their own life, but also harm so many innocent people who had trusted them. And the mechanic looked up at me with red, swollen eyes and said through his tears, "Sir, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, I am begging you one last time. My children are young. They don't know what their father has been doing. They are innocent in all this. And if I go to jail or if my business is destroyed, they will suffer, and they don't deserve that." And I felt my resolve wavering a bit because he was right. His children were innocent, and they would indeed suffer if their father was arrested and his business was shut down. But then I remembered all the other families that he had stolen from all the other children whose parents had to pay extra money because of his scams, money that could have been used for their education or their needs. And I said to him, what about all the other children whose families you have stolen from? Did you think about them when you were taking parts from their parents' cars? Did you consider how your actions might affect them? And he had no answer to that. He just kept crying and saying, "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." And at that moment, the other customer finished his phone call and came over to us and said, "The police are on their way. They will be here in 10 minutes and they want us to wait and not let him leave." And the mechanic heard this and completely panicked, and he tried to stand up and run towards the back door of the shop, but I quickly moved and blocked his path and said, "Where do you think you are going? You need to face what you have done. You cannot run away from this." And he stopped and looked at me with desperation in his eyes and said, "Please, sir, just let me go. I will disappear. I will leave this city. I will never do this again. Just please let me go before the police arrive." And I shook my head and said, "No, that is not how this works. You have broken the law, you have stolen from people, and you need to answer for your crimes. Running away will not solve anything." And he fell back to his knees and continued sobbing. And the other customer said to me, "You did the right thing by catching him. Thank you for exposing this scam, because I have been bringing my car here for years. And now I realize he has probably been cheating me all this time. And I need to check all my previous bills and see how much money I have lost." And I nodded and said, "Yes, you should definitely do that. And probably many other customers should be informed as well, so they can also check if they have been scammed." And just then we heard the sound of sirens outside, and we saw police cars pulling up in front of the shop. And 2 police officers got out and walked into the garage, and they looked at the scene, the mechanic on the floor crying me, standing with my phone, and the other customer standing nearby. And one of the officers said, "What seems to be the problem here?" And I stepped forward and explained everything that had happened and showed them the video footage from my hidden camera, and the officers watched the video carefully, and their expressions became serious. And one of them said, "This is clear evidence of theft and fraud." And the other officer went over to the mechanic and said, "Sir, you need to come with us to the station." And the mechanic looked up with a face full of terror and said, "No, please, I cannot go to jail. Please give me another chance." But the officer said, "Sir, you have committed a crime and you need to face the legal consequences. Please stand up and come with us." And the mechanic slowly stood up, his legs shaking, and he looked at me one last time with an expression that was a mix of anger, hatred, and resignation, and he said, "You have destroyed my life. I hope you are happy now." And I looked at him calmly and said, "I did not destroy your life. You destroyed it yourself with your own actions." I simply exposed the truth, and the officer put handcuffs on the mechanic and started leading him towards the door. And as they were leaving, the mechanic turned around and shouted at me, "You will regret this. I promise you. Will regret this." And the officer told him to be quiet, and they took him outside to the police car. And I watched through the window as they put him in the back seat and drove away. And the garage suddenly felt very quiet and empty. And the other customer came over to me and shook my hand and said, "Thank you so much for doing this. You have saved many people from being scammed in the future." And I said, "I just did what anyone should do when they see something wrong." And he said, "No, most people would have just let it go or handled it quietly, but you had the courage to expose him publicly, and that takes guts. And I smiled and said, well, I think it is important to stand up against fraud and dishonesty, especially when it affects innocent people. And we talked for a few more minutes and exchanged phone numbers. And he said he would definitely spread the word in the community about what had happened here. And I agreed that awareness was important so that other mechanics would think twice before trying similar scams. And as I was about to leave, I went over to my car and retrieved my hidden camera, and I looked at the footage one more time and felt a sense of satisfaction that justice had been served. After the police took the mechanic away, I spent some time talking with the other customer, and we both agreed that this incident needed to be shared with the wider community so that other people could be aware and protect themselves from similar scams. And he told me that he was part of a local community group on social media where people shared information about businesses and services in the area, and he asked if it would be okay to post about what had happened here, and I said absolutely yes, people deserve to know the truth. And so he took out his phone and started typing a detailed post about the incident, while I gave him all the relevant details, and within minutes he had posted it to the community group, along with a warning to everyone to be careful about where they take their cars for repairs. And almost immediately, people started responding to the post with shocked reactions and comments, and some people shared their own experiences of feeling like they had been overcharged or suspicious about work that had been done on their vehicles at various shops. And it was eye-opening to see how common these kinds of scams were, and how many people had been affected but were too afraid or didn't know how to do anything about it. And I felt glad that I had taken the step to expose this particular mechanic, because even if it was just one shop out of many, at least, it would make a difference for some people. And as I was reading through the comments on the post, I received a phone call from one of the police officers who had arrested the mechanic, and he told me that they needed me to come to the police station to give an official statement and provide the video evidence for their investigation. And I said, of course, I would be there right away. And so I drove to the police station, which was about 15 minutes away. And when I arrived, I was taken to a room where I sat down with the officer and went through everything that had happened, step by step. And the officer was very professional and thorough, and asked me detailed questions about when I had first suspected something was wrong, how I had obtained the hidden camera, what I had observed on the video footage, and what had happened during the confrontation. And I answered all his questions honestly, and provided him with a copy of the video files from my camera, and he told me that this evidence would be crucial for the case against the mechanic, and that based on what they had seen so far, the mechanic would likely face serious charges including theft, fraud, and possibly operating a scam business. And the officer also mentioned that they would be reaching out to other customers of that shop to see if anyone else wanted to come forward with complaints, and I said that was a good idea because I was sure there were many others who had been victimized over the years. And after I finished giving my statement, the officer thanked me for my cooperation and said that I had done a public service by exposing this scam. And he told me that cases like this often went unreported because people either didn't realize they had been scammed or they felt powerless to do anything about it. And having someone like me who was willing to take action and provide evidence made their job much easier. And I left the police station feeling a sense of accomplishment. And as I drove home, I reflected on everything that had happened that day, and I thought about how a simple suspicion and a 20-minute return to the shop had led to exposing a major scam operation and potentially saving many other people from being cheated. And over the next few days, the story continued to spread throughout the community, and I received several messages from people thanking me and sharing their own stories, and some people even told me that they had gone back to that mechanic shop in the past and now realized that they had probably been scammed too, and they were planning to file complaints with the police as well. And the local news even picked up the story and did a segment about mechanic scams and consumer protection, and they interviewed me briefly. And I used that opportunity to encourage other people to be vigilant and to trust their instincts when something doesn't feel right, and to always ask questions and demand transparency from service providers. And a few weeks later, I received another call from the police officer telling me that the mechanic had been formally charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud, and that several other victims had come forward with evidence and complaints, and he said that based on the strength of the case, the mechanic would likely face significant penalties, including possible jail time and definitely the permanent loss of his business license. And I felt that justice had been served, not just for me, but for all the other people who had been wronged by this man over the years. And I also learned that the mechanic's shop had been shut down and sealed by the authorities, and a notice had been put up warning people not to do business there, and in the end this whole experience taught me several important lessons about the importance of being vigilant and not blindly trusting people, even when they have good reputations, about the power of evidence and technology in exposing wrongdoing, and about the responsibility we all have to stand up against fraud and dishonesty, even when it might be easier to just walk away. And I felt proud that I had made the decision to confront the mechanic and bring him to justice, and I hoped that my actions would inspire others to do the same when they encountered similar situations, because only by holding people accountable for their actions can we create a society where honesty and integrity are valued, and where scammers think twice before trying to cheat innocent people. And as for my car, I took it to a different mechanic who came highly recommended by several trusted friends, and he fixed it properly with genuine parts and charged me a fair price, and I made sure to leave him a positive review online, because honest businesses deserve recognition and support just as much as dishonest ones deserve to be exposed and shut down. And that is how my 20-minute return to catch a mechanic turned into a victory for consumer justice.